They laughed when their sensors scanned our stockpiles. To an empire that had conquered 1,000 stars, our nuclear warheads were firecrackers, and our fighter jets were mere gnats. They gave humanity 48 hours to bow, but they made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed we fought by their rules. It happened on a Tuesday. There was no grand interstellar fanfare, no preliminary transmission of prime numbers, and no gradual buildup of anomalous deep space signals. They simply appeared. At 0814 hours Eastern Standard Time, the sky above 32 of Earth's major metropolitan and military centers darkened. A massive displacement of atmosphere sent shockwaves rattling through the glass canyons of New York, the ancient streets of London, and the sprawling grids of Tokyo. In the skies above Washington, D.C., a vessel the size of Manhattan Island materialized out of a localized vacuum distortion, its hull a jagged geometry of matte black metal that drank the morning sunlight. In the subterranean depths of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, General John Hackett stared at the main strategic display. The screens, usually a calm array of geopolitical data, were flashing violently with red proximity warnings. Radar operators were shouting over one another, their voices laced with a frantic disbelief that years of rigorous military training couldn't suppress. "Track it!" Hackett barked, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Give me a visual. Give me thermal. Give me anything." "Sir, we're trying," responded Major Collins, his hands flying across his console. "Optical sensors are being overwhelmed by local gravitational lensing. The sheer mass of these objects is distorting our satellite feeds. We have 32 confirmed contacts in the lower exosphere, all stationary." Secretary of Defense Benjamin Hayes stood beside Hackett, his face pale, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Are they hostile, John?" Before Hackett could answer, every screen in the command center flickered and died. The hum of the backup generators was the only sound for 3 agonizing seconds. When the screens flared back to life, the tactical maps were gone. Instead, a face appeared on every monitor, every television, every smartphone, and every digital billboard across the planet. The entity was humanoid, but only in the broadest sense. Its skin was a pale, iridescent gray, pulled taut over an elongated skull. 4 deeply inset, pupilless black eyes stared out with a terrifying ancient indifference. It wore armor that pulsed with a faint, violet luminescence. When it spoke, the voice did not come through the speakers. It resonated directly within the auditory cortex of every human being on Earth, translated perfectly into their native tongues. "I am Vrogel, Fleet Master of the Xylari Ascendancy," the voice echoed, vibrating with a metallic, condescending hum. "We have analyzed your world. We have scanned your planetary defenses, your primitive chemical propulsion systems, and your crude fission and fusion explosives. Your technology is infantile. Your weapons are primitive toys, fit only for apes playing with fire." Hackett's jaw tightened. "Trace that signal. Find out how they're bypassing our encryption." "Do not attempt to resist," Vrogel continued, a cruel smile curling the edges of his lipless mouth. "Our magnetic displacement shields can withstand the concentrated energy of a dying star. Your weapons will not scratch our paint. You have 48 of your planetary hours to initiate a total, unconditional surrender of all global governments. If you fail to comply, we will begin planetary sterilization. Resistance is not merely futile. It is mathematically impossible." The transmission cut out. The tactical maps returned, showing the 32 behemoths hovering ominously in the upper atmosphere. President Margaret Cole, securely locked in the Presidential Emergency Operations Center beneath the White House, immediately convened a secure line with the Joint Chiefs, the UN Security Council, and the leaders of the world's most advanced military power. "We need a show of force," the Russian premier argued through the encrypted feed. "We cannot wait for them to fire first." Against the advice of her science advisors, President Cole authorized a localized, strictly controlled kinetic test. A single conventionally armed Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile was launched from a silo in North Dakota, aimed precisely at the center of mass of the dreadnought hovering over the American Midwest. Captain Liam Bradley, piloting an F-35 Lightning II at 40,000 feet, had a front row seat to the interception. Viper 1. "I have visual on the package," he reported, watching the contrail of the ICBM arc toward the monolithic black ship. The world held its breath. 2 miles from the hull of the Xylari vessel, the missile suddenly halted. It didn't explode. It simply stopped in midair, caught against an invisible, shimmering barrier of violet energy. For a split second, the missile hung suspended. And then, with a flash of searing light, it was disintegrated. Not detonated, erased. Reduced to its constituent atoms by an energy field humanity couldn't even begin to comprehend. A slow, mocking laugh echoed across the global comms network. Vrogel was watching. A pathetic display, the alien commander sneered. 47 hours and 50 pair minutes. Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Secretary Hayes slammed his fist onto the console. We have nothing. Our nukes won't even reach the hull. They've neutered us. General Hackett stared at the radar signatures, his eyes narrowing. He picked up a secure red phone, bypassing standard Pentagon channels. Get me Dr. Stanton. Tell her it's time to open the Black Book. 2,000 miles away, deep beneath the Nevada desert in a DARPA black site, classified above top secret, Dr. Emily Stanton was already running the numbers. Stanton was a prodigy in theoretical physics, recruited directly out of MIT by the Department of Defense. For the past decade, she had been the chief architect of a shadow collaboration between DARPA, Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, and Raytheon. The general public believed humanity's first encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence happened today. Stanton knew better. In 2017, the interstellar object dubbed Oumuamua times passed through the solar system. While the world's civilian astronomers debated if it was a comet or an asteroid, a highly classified deep space telemetry array operated by the NRO caught something else. Active, targeted electromagnetic scanning originating from the object. Earth had been mapped. They knew we were being watched, and they knew the watchers were technologically vastly superior. When General Hackett's face appeared on Stanton's secure monitor, she didn't wait for him to speak. General, I saw the Minuteman telemetry, Stanton said, her fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard as she pulled up highly complex physics models. They're using a localized repulsor field. It's a high-frequency electromagnetic shield designed to absorb and deflect plasma, radiation, and thermal energy. Standard sci-fi stuff. Our nukes are useless, because a nuclear explosion is primarily thermal radiation and electromagnetic pulse. The shield eats it for breakfast. Give me good news, Emily, Hackett said gruffly. Tell me Times, Gungnir Times, is operational. Stanton paused, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Operational is a strong word. We are currently undergoing final calibration. But yes, the theory holds. The Xyleri, if that's what they call themselves, have evolved their defense systems to counter advanced energy weapons. Lasers, plasma batteries, particle beams. They rely on the presumption that any advanced species will fight with energy. She brought up a schematic on the shared screen. It showed a massive subterranean structure, not on land, but deep underwater. They forgot about kinetic energy. Raw, unadulterated, stupid mass, Stanton explained, a grim smile forming. Project Fa Gungnir Fa was not a bomb. It was the largest macroparticle accelerator ever constructed, built into the vertical cliff face of the Mariana Trench, utilizing the immense pressure and cooling capacity of the deep ocean. It was a joint venture. Boeing handled the structural deep-sea engineering, Raytheon designed the targeting matrix, and Lockheed Martin built the payload. The payload, Stanton continued, bringing up a 3D model of a sleek heavy cylinder, is a 3-ton solid slug of osmium and depleted uranium, coated in a synthetic metamaterial designed to ignore electromagnetic friction. We aren't going to shoot them with a laser, General. We're going to throw a very heavy rock at them, very, very fast. Secretary Hayes leaned into the camera frame at Cheyenne Mountain. How fast is very fast, Doctor? They just vaporized an ICBM traveling at Mach 23. Stanton brought up a LaTeX-formatted calculation on the screen, detailing the relativistic kinetic energy equation. $E, K equals left frac 1, squirt 1, frac V, 2C, 2-1, right MC, $2. Mach 23 is a crawl, Stanton said, pointing to the variables. Gungnir uses a sequential cascade of directed nuclear detonations. Kasaba howitzer technology funneled through a vacuum tube combined with a linear magnetic induction track. We are accelerating this 3-ton slug to 0.15 times c, 15% the speed of light. Silence hung over the line in Cheyenne Mountain. At that velocity, Stanton continued quietly. The slug possesses a kinetic energy yield equivalent to a multi-gigaton thermonuclear detonation, but focused entirely on a point the size of a dinner plate. It won't trigger their electromagnetic shields because it's not an energy weapon, and it's moving too fast for their localized automated point defenses to track. By the time their sensors register the mass, the slug will have already passed through their ship. Can it take down the flagship? President Cole's voice entered the comms loop. Madam President, Stanton replied. It won't just take it down. At relativistic speeds, the friction of the slug hitting the ship's armor will cause the surrounding atmospheric molecules and the hull matter itself to undergo spontaneous nuclear fusion. It will crack the dreadnought in half like a dry twig. What's the catch, Doctor? Hackett asked. He knew there was always a catch. The charge time, Stanton admitted, her tone darkening. To spin up the supercapacitors and align the magnetic containment fields for the nuclear pump, we need time. And we are currently experiencing a localized coolant pressure fluctuation in Trench Sector 4. Chief Engineer David Miller is down there right now in a pressure suit trying to bypass a faulty pressure valve manually. How much time do you need? Cole asked. Stanton looked at the ticking countdown on her wall. 49 hours. We only have 47 left, Hayes interjected. Then you need to buy me 2 hours, Mr. Secretary, Stanton said bluntly. Stall them. Talk to them. Do whatever you have to do. Because if we fire Gungnir before the containment field is fully stable, the thermal backwash will vaporize the Mariana Trench facility, and Earth loses its only gun. The next 46 hours were a masterclass in desperate global diplomacy and psychological torture. The Xyleri did not wait idly. To demonstrate their power, they systematically destroyed Earth's satellite network. The night sky lit up with artificial shooting stars as the International Space Station, GPS arrays, and communication satellites were swatted from orbit by pinpoint laser fire. The global economy collapsed overnight. Mass riots tore through major cities, driven by the absolute certainty of impending extinction. Through it all, President Cole and the UN delegates played for time. They drafted endless surrender treaties, requested clarification on Xylari occupational law, and feigned bureaucratic incompetence, anything to keep Vrogel talking. 47 hours and 50 minutes. Aboard the Xylari Command Dreadnought, hovering menacingly over the Los Angeles basin, Fleet Master Vrogel stood on his command bridge. The floor was transparent, offering him a god's eye view of the sprawling, terrified human city below. Fleet Master, his subordinate, a sub-commander with scarred gray skin, hissed in their native tongue. The human leaders continue to transmit localized surrender parameters. They are requesting an additional solar cycle to prepare their populations for our arrival. Vrogel waved a dismissive, multi-jointed hand. Enough of this primitive groveling. They seek to delay the inevitable out of cowardice. We have granted them the standard 48 planetary hours. The time has expired. Your orders, Fleet Master? Vrogel looked down at the millions of tiny lights flickering in the Los Angeles sprawl. Drop our lower atmospheric displacement shields by 5%. Prepare the primary plasma spinal mount. We will glass this Los Angeles's to demonstrate the price of tardiness. Let the rest of the planet watch them burn. 47 hours and 55 minutes. In the Marianas Trench, 36,000 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, alarms were screaming in the cramped command module of the Gungnir facility. Coolant pressure is at 90%, Chief Engineer David Miller shouted over the roar of the massive turbines spinning up around them. He was soaked in sweat, his hands bruised from manually locking the override valves. Capacitors are redlining, Dr. Stanton. If we push it any harder, the magnetic track is going to warp before the slug even reaches the muzzle. In Nevada, Stanton watched the telemetry feeds with a cold, terrifying focus. Hold it together, David. We just need 3 more minutes. President Cole, the weapon is at 94% capacity. It's now or never. General Hackett, Cole's voice was remarkably steady. Are we locked on? Targeting data is being fed via hardline submarine cables from Naval Base San Diego, Hackett confirmed from Cheyenne Mountain. Since we lost satellite uplinks, we are using ground-based phased array radar. We have a solid lock on Vrogel's command ship over LA. Madam President, they are powering up a weapon. Massive thermal bloom detected on the underside of the alien dreadnought. They are preparing to fire on the city. Cole closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. The weight of millions of lives rested on her shoulders. Dr. Stanton, you have a green light. Fire. Acknowledged, Stanton said. She turned a physical master key on her console and slammed her hand down on a glowing red mechanical switch. Gungnir is firing. May God have mercy on their souls. Because physics won't. Deep in the Pacific, a sequence of precisely timed, low-yield, nuclear-shaped charges detonated within the massive vacuum tube. The explosive force, rather than expanding outward, was funneled perfectly upward by an immense magnetic field. The 3-ton osmium slug caught the shockwave, riding it like a surfer on a tsunami of atomic fire. As it passed through sequential magnetic accelerator rings, its velocity compounded exponentially. Mach 10, Mach 100, Mach 1000. Fractional percentages of the speed of light. The ocean's surface above the Mariana Trench erupted. A column of superheated steam and boiling seawater instantly flashed into the atmosphere, creating a temporary localized hurricane as the slug exited the ocean. It took less than 0.2 seconds for the projectile to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the airspace above Los Angeles. Aboard the Xylari flagship, alarms suddenly blared, a sound Vogel had never heard on a primitive world. "Fleet Master!" the sub-commander shrieked, his eyes wide with sudden terror. "Massive kinetic anomaly detected on a ballistic trajectory. It is moving at—" He never finished the sentence. The osmium slug, traveling at 0.15 times c, impacted the direct center of the Xylari dreadnought's underside, just as they lowered their shields to fire their own weapon. There was no sound, not at first. The human eye couldn't even register the impact. What happened was a sudden, violent tearing of reality. The kinetic energy transfer was so absolute, so unfathomably violent, that the dense alien armor didn't just break, it underwent forced atomic disassembly. A sphere of blinding, pure white light, brighter than the sun, expanded in the stratosphere above California. The 3-ton slug punched cleanly through the 5-mile-thick vessel, coring it from bottom to top, carrying with it a trail of superheated plasma created by its own friction. For a single heartbeat, the massive black ship hung in the sky, a neat, glowing hole punched perfectly through its center. Then, the laws of thermodynamics collected their due. The kinetic shockwave rippled outward through the ship's internal structure. The dreadnought shuddered violently, and then, with a deafening, sky-shattering roar that shattered every pane of glass from Santa Monica to Pasadena, the Xylari flagship detonated. It broke apart into millions of burning, jagged pieces, raining down upon the ocean and the unpopulated hillsides, deflected away from the city center by the sheer upward force of the blast. In Cheyenne Mountain, the radar screen showing the massive blip over Los Angeles suddenly cleared. The blip was gone, replaced by a rapidly expanding cloud of debris. The command center was dead silent. General Hackett slowly lowered his binoculars, though he was hundreds of miles away, staring at a blank wall as if he could see the sky. In Nevada, Dr. Stanton let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 10 years. Target destroyed. Gungnir muzzle is compromised. We have structural damage in the trench, but the shot was true. In the skies across the world, the remaining 31 Xylari dreadnoughts suddenly broke formation. The arrogant, unified silence of their communications network dissolved into a frantic, encrypted chatter of panic. They had expected apes with fire. They had expected primitive missiles and easily deflected lasers. They had not expected humanity to weaponize the fundamental laws of motion to crack the sky in half. The global comms flickered, and this time, it wasn't Vogel's voice that echoed across the world. It was President Margaret Cole, broadcasting on an open, unencrypted frequency aimed squarely at the alien fleet. "This is the President of Earth," Cole's voice rang out, cold as steel. "Your shields don't stop our rocks. You have 48 hours to get off our planet, or we reload." The silence that followed the destruction of the Xylari flagship was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum left by shattered paradigms. For 10,000 years, the Xylari ascendancy had dominated the Orion Cygnus arm of the galaxy. They had conquered species that communicated through quantum entanglement and races that could fold space. But they had never, in their recorded history, been struck by an unshielded, unguided kinetic mass moving at a fractional percentage of the speed of light. To the alien sensors, Earth's attack hadn't registered as a weapon. It had registered as a sudden, impossible geological event. Aboard the Times Vanguard of Truth, hovering over the English Channel, Subfleet Master Corvin watched the telemetry feed of Vrogel's dreadnought expanding into a cloud of stratospheric ash. His 4 obsidian eyes widened in a profoundly un-Xylari display of terror. The Ascendancy did not feel fear, they calculated probability. And the probability of a primitive type, zero civilization, instantly annihilating a flagship was 0. Yet, the ash raining down on the Pacific Ocean proved the math wrong. "Trace the ballistic trajectory," Corvin hissed, his voice crackling over the encrypted fleet-wide channel, bypassing the now-dead Fleet Master. Where did the anomaly originate? Sub-Fleet Master, a trembling sensor operator, replied, "The origin point is sub-oceanic. Coordinates plot to a localized geological trench in the planet's largest hydrosphere. Depth is extreme. They fought through the water." Corvin's mind raced. An oceanic kinetic accelerator. It was crude, barbaric, and utterly devastating. But his tactical subroutines quickly processed the fatal flaw in humanity's superweapon. A weapon of that magnitude, utilizing chemical and primitive magnetic propulsion, cannot sustain rapid fire, Corvin deduced, his cold logic returning. The thermal feedback and localized pressure displacement would require significant recalibration. They are reloading. Corvin activated the global override. All vessels abandon planetary suppression coordinates. Form up at Grid Sector Pacific Alpha. We will boil the ocean and turn their trench to glass before they can fire again. Deploy all subaquatic pacification drones. Tear their facility apart. In the Presidential Emergency Operations Center beneath the White House, President Margaret Cole watched the Palantir predictive threat software mapping the alien movements in real time. The massive black jagged icons representing the 31 remaining dreadnoughts were suddenly peeling away from the world's capitals. "They're moving." Secretary of Defense Benjamin Hayes breathed, leaning over the holographic tactical table. "London, Tokyo, New York. The skies are clearing. They're abandoning the hostage strategy. They aren't retreating, Ben," General John Hackett said grimly, pointing a weathered finger at the converging red vectors on the map. "They figured out where the bullet came from. They're swarming the Mariana Trench." Cole pressed the secure comms button. "Dr. Stanton, what is your status? You're about to have company." 3.5 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific, the Gungnir facility was in chaos. The command module was bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting. Sparks rained from overhead conduits, and the deafening groan of thousands of tons of deep-sea pressure strained against the reinforced bulkheads. Dr. Emily Stanton wiped a smear of blood from her forehead, cut by a shattered monitor during the immense recoil of the first shot. "Madam President, we are critically damaged." The shot was successful, but the localized thermal bloom boiled a cubic mile of water directly above us. The back pressure warped the secondary magnetic induction rings. "We have a jam in the barrel." "Can you clear it?" Hackett demanded. "Not from in here," Stanton said, her voice shaking but resolute. "The alignment is physical. Someone has to go outside into the crush depth, enter the flooded primary acceleration chamber, and manually detonate the explosive bolts to jettison the warped rings. Only then can we cycle a second osmium slug into the breach." "Who's going?" Cole asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Before Stanton could answer, Chief Engineer David Miller's voice crackled over the intercom. He was already in the airlock, sealed inside a DARPA-engineered, deep-sea hardened atmospheric suit. It was a bulky, titanium-reinforced exoskeleton designed to withstand the crushing weight of the Mariana Trench. "I'm already in the tube," Dr. Stanton, Miller said, his breathing heavy and amplified. "I have the thermal cutting gear and the remote detonators. I'm walking the track now." "David, the water temperature in the barrel is still over 200 degrees from the plasma backwash," Stanton warned, tears stinging her eyes. "Your suit's cooling systems will fail in less than 10 minutes. "Then I'd better work fast," Miller replied. The heavy thud of his magnetic boots echoed through the comms as he stepped into the flooded, pitch-black abyss of the massive accelerator tube. Above them, the sky was turning to fire. The first of the 31 Xylari dreadnoughts breached the clouds over the Pacific. They did not wait to assume hovering positions. The undersides of the massive black ships glowed with sickening violet radiation as they unleashed continuous beams of concentrated plasma directly into the ocean. The water didn't just boil, it flashed into steam instantly, creating massive, artificial typhoon. Millions of gallons of seawater evaporated by the second as the alien fleet attempted to dig through the Pacific Ocean using raw energy. Admiral Mitchell. General Hackett barked into his headset, patching into the United States Indo-Pacific Command. You are to throw everything you have at that fleet. I don't care if you're throwing rocks. Buy Miller time. Copy that, Cheyenne, Admiral Mitchell replied from the bridge of the USS Times Gerald R. Ford, currently steaming at flank speed 300 miles from the engagement zone. All groups, weapons free. Give 'em hell. The skies above the Pacific erupted into the largest naval engagement in human history. Dozens of times, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and times Virginia-class submarines unleashed a torrent of weaponry. Hundreds of Raytheon-built Tomahawk and experimental hypersonics painted the sky with contrails. Northrop Grumman B-21 Raiders, operating in total stealth, dropped payloads of advanced electromagnetic pulse bombs. The human missiles slammed into the alien displacement shields like rain against a window pane, exploding in useless, spectacular flashes of fire. The Xylari didn't even bother to intercept the missiles. Their shields absorbed the kinetic and thermal energy effortlessly. But the barrage wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to distract. Incoming! A radar operator on the Times Ford Times screamed. They're dropping pods. From the bellies of the alien dreadnoughts, thousands of sleek, teardrop-shaped objects plummeted into the boiling ocean. They hit the water with zero splash, utilizing advanced hydrodynamic fields to slice through the Pacific. These were Xylari pacification drones, submersible, automated kill vehicles designed to locate the Gungnir facility and rip it apart claw by metal claw. General Dynamics hunter-killer subs engage those drones, Mitchell ordered. Beneath the chaotic surface, a silent, deadly ballet commenced. American and Allied submarines fired supercavitating torpedoes at the alien drones. The deep ocean flashed with silent explosions. The Xylari drones were fast, but they were designed for atmospheric pacification, not the crushing, unforgiving physics of deep-sea warfare. In the dark, crushing depths, the human submariners were the undisputed apex predators. Yet, there were too many. For every drone destroyed, 3 more slipped past the defensive net, spiraling down into the blackness toward the Mariana Trench. Deep inside the Gungnir barrel, David Miller was running out of time. "I'm at the warped junction," Miller grunted, his voice distorted by static and pain. Inside his suit, the temperature had reached a blistering 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The sweat was pooling in his boots, and his vision was blurring. Setting the explosive bolts on the magnetic ring now. He wrestled with the massive melted titanium clamps, his exoskeleton whining under the strain. He wedged the shaped charges into the microfractures of the warped ring. "Drones are on the sonar, David!" Stanton screamed into the mic. "They're 2 miles above you and descending fast. You need to clear the tube." "Charges set!" Miller gasped. He turned to trudge back toward the airlock, but the warped metal shifted under the immense oceanic pressure, pinning his massive left leg beneath a 3-ton piece of slag. He pulled. The exoskeleton servos screamed, but the metal didn't budge. "David, what's happening?" Stanton cried, seeing his biometric vitals spiking on her screen. "I'm pinned," Miller said, his voice eerily calm as the reality of the situation washed over him. He looked down the pitch-black barrel of humanity's only gun. "Dr. Stanton, Emily, I can't get out. We'll send an ROV. There's no time," Miller interrupted. The pinging of the alien drones against the facility's outer hull reverberated through the water. They were here. If those drones breach the primary capacitors, the nuclear pump goes critical. It'll take out the whole trench. You have to blow the bolts now. You have to fire. In the White House, President Cole closed her eyes. The silence on the command loop was heavy, suffocating. "Madam President," Stanton sobbed, her hand hovering over the detonator. "If I blow the bolts with him in the tube, the pressure differential will crush him instantly. And if we fire." "He'll be vaporized," Hackett finished quietly. "Do it, Emily," Miller said. "Tell my kids. Tell them I didn't back down. Drop the hammer." Cole took a ragged breath. "God forgive us. Do it, Doctor." Stanton turned the key and slammed the detonator. Deep in the trench, the explosive bolts shattered the warped magnetic ring. The massive piece of titanium, along with Miller, was violently flushed forward into the lower barrel. Miller's biometrics instantly flatlined. He was gone. "Barrel is clear," Stanton whispered, her voice dead. She slammed the loading mechanism. Breach locked. Supercapacitors at 100%. Target acquired. Firing. Aboard the Time's Vanguard of Truth, Subfleet Master Corvan watched with satisfaction as the oceanic temperatures spiked. The human defenses were a nuisance, but mathematically irrelevant. In 4 minutes, the Pacific would be boiled away enough to expose the trench. "Sir, the localized gravitational anomaly from the trench is spiking again," his sensor chief yelled. Corvan sneered. "Our shields are concentrated entirely on our lower hulls. Let them throw their rocks. The kinetic impact will be absorbed by the overlapping shield matrix of 31 vessels." He was right. Gungnir was a sniper rifle. It couldn't kill a clustered fleet. But Corvan didn't understand human deception. "General Hackett," President Cole said, her eyes locked on the Palantir grid. Gungnir fired its second shot. "Have the aliens reacted?" "Just as predicted, ma'am," Hackett replied, a feral grin spreading across his face. To absorb the kinetic impact of the Mariana Slug, the alien fleet has diverted 100% of their displacement shields to their undersides. Their top hulls are completely exposed. Cole nodded slowly. "Activate Project Damocles." While the world believed Gungnir was Earth's only defense, DARPA and the newly formed United States Space Force had not spent the last decade building just one weapon. They knew a deep-sea accelerator was vulnerable. So, they partnered with SpaceX, utilizing hundreds of classified, heavy-lift Starship launches over 5 years to secretly assemble an orbital platform hidden within the dense debris field of the asteroid belt, drifting silently until summoned. Project Damocles Times was not a high-tech laser or an antimatter bomb. Like Gungnir, it relied on the terrifying, undeniable laws of kinetic energy. High above the Earth, orbiting at an altitude of 2,000 miles, 12 massive, stealth-coated satellites suddenly dropped their optical camouflage. Their cargo bays opened, exposing the cold vacuum of space to racks of solid tungsten telephone poles, each weighing 10 tons. "Space Force Command, this is Orbital Platform 1. A calm voice echoed over Cheyenne Mountain's secure feed. "Payloads released. Gravity is doing the rest." From the exosphere, 400 solid tungsten rods began their descent. They had no explosive warheads, no guidance systems to be jammed, and no electronic components to be shielded against. They were just heavy metal, accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared, dragged down by Earth's gravity, burning through the atmosphere like a meteor shower of apocalyptic proportions. By the time they reached the troposphere, the rods were traveling at Mach 15. Below, the second Gungnir slug erupted from the Pacific Ocean. As Corvan predicted, the osmium projectile slammed into the overlapping, hyperdense shields on the underside of the Xyleri fleet. The impact was titanic, creating a shockwave that flattened waves for 100 miles, but the shields held. The alien fleet groaned under the kinetic stress, but they did not break. Corvan allowed himself a chilling, lipless smile. Their weapon is exhausted. Annihilate the trench. "Subfleet Master!" the sensor operator shrieked, pointing a trembling, multi-jointed digit at the overhead display. "Anomalies descending from orbit. Multiple kinetic contacts." They are. The tungsten rain hit. 400 rods of solid, hyperdense metal struck the completely unshielded upper hulls of the 31 Xylari dreadnoughts simultaneously. At Mach 15, the kinetic energy of a 10-ton tungsten rod is equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. The alien armor, designed to dissipate energy weapons, shattered like cheap glass under the brute force impact of falling mass. The rods punched cleanly through the top decks, tearing through command bridges, plasma conduits, and hyperdrives, before exiting through the bottom hulls. The Time's Vanguard of Truth Times was struck by 14 rods simultaneously. Corvan didn't even have time to register the ceiling of his bridge, collapsing before the kinetic shockwave turned his biological form into a smear of purple fluid. The skies over the Pacific became a slaughterhouse. Secondary explosions ripped through the alien fleet as their own plasma engines, breached by the tungsten rods, went critical. Massive, burning chunks of black metal, some the size of city blocks, rained down into the boiling ocean, sending up geysers of steam that touched the stratosphere. In Cheyenne Mountain, the radar operators watched in stunned silence as the 31 red blips on the board vanished in a span of 12 seconds. Confirm impacts, Hackett whispered, gripping the edge of the console. Visuals confirming. General, Major Collins replied, his voice cracking with emotion. The fleet! The fleet is gone! The Pacific is littered with debris. The alien pacification drones have lost their command signals. They're dead in the water. Cheers erupted in the command center. Men and women in uniform wept, hugging each other, screaming until their lungs gave out. Deep in the Mariana Trench, Dr. Emily Stanton leaned back in her chair, staring at the empty, flooded barrel of Gungnir. The facility was dark, running on emergency power, but the catastrophic alarms had ceased. She placed her hand against the cold steel of the bulkhead. "We did it, David," she whispered into the dark. "You did it." In the Oval Office, President Cole stood at her desk. The weight of the world, heavy just moments before, had subtly shifted. The immediate threat was gone, but the universe had irreversibly changed. Humanity was no longer alone, and they were no longer safe, but neither were the Xylari. 2 dreadnoughts on the edge of the formation had survived the orbital bombardment, heavily damaged and leaking plasma. Instead of fighting, they immediately engaged their localized vacuum distortion drives, tearing open tiers in spacetime to flee back to the Ascendancy. Cole didn't order the Navy to shoot them down. She wanted them to run. She needed them to deliver a message. "Patch me through to the global broadcast," Cole ordered, "and see if you can bounce this off the fleeing ship's comms arrays. Let their empire hear it." A moment later, her voice echoed across the battered, bruised, but unbowed planet and out into the cold void of space. "To the Xylari Ascendancy, and anyone else listening in the dark," Cole said, her voice devoid of diplomatic warmth, replaced by the cold, hard steel of a species that had just discovered its fangs. "You came to our home expecting apes playing with fire. You relied on advanced shields and elegant energy weapons. You forgot the fundamental rule of the universe. Mass times acceleration equals death." She paused, looking out the window at the sky, no longer filled with alien ships, but with the smoke of victory. "We are keeping your technology. We will reverse engineer your engines, your armor, and your shields. We will rebuild our world, and then we are looking up. Earth is closed to invaders. But humanity is just getting started." Did you enjoy this thrilling sci-fi HFY story? If you want more epic tales of humanity defying the odds, proving to the universe that our ingenuity and raw determination are the greatest weapons of all, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans, and subscribe to the channel for weekly stories of human triumph. What should humanity build next with the alien tech? Let me know in the comments below.
Hi, my name is Tran Trung, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, "Your weapons are primitive, the invaders laughed until Earth fired the first shot," _HFY story, I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the mix of determination and ingenuity. Instead of giving up when the odds looked impossible, humanity found a different way to face the challenge. It's a reminder that real strength isn't always about having the biggest advantage. It's often about thinking differently and refusing to quit when everyone expects you to fail. Which moment stood out to you the most? The aliens' confidence at the beginning, the first successful strike, or the teamwork that made it all possible? Do you think creativity can be a greater advantage than superior technology? One lesson I'll take from this story is to never underestimate the value of persistence and fresh ideas when facing difficult situations. If this adventure gave you something to think about, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy HFY stories like this, feel free to like the video or subscribe for more journeys across the stars.